To hear this and many more audiobooks in a podcast feed, please visit the first link in the description below. Thank you for your support. The Governance of China, Volume 3, by Xi Jinping. Audiobook, Part 7. Further Reform. Follow the guidance of the third plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee, part of the speech at the second full assembly of the third plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee, February 28, 2018. Here, I'd like to make a few points on how we should implement the decision of the plenary session from the perspective of the guiding philosophy, overall plans, objectives, and tasks it has set out. First, we must be clear on the fundamental issue of upholding the authority and the centralized, unified leadership of the CPC Central Committee. Upholding and strengthening overall party leadership is an intrinsic requirement and an important element of further reform of party and state institutions. It is a political theme that underpins the entire process of reform. It was clearly stated at the party's 19th National Congress last year that the primary task in reinforcing the party's political foundations is to ensure that the whole party obeys the Central Committee and upholds its authority and centralized, unified leadership. The power of making principles and guidelines of the party and the state rests with the Central Committee, and the whole party must safeguard the final and sole authority of the Central Committee through concrete action. Any organization and member of the party, whatever their level or field and wherever they are, must obey the centralized, unified leadership of the Central Committee. All the work under the charge of central departments and local authorities must be planned and implemented in a context of resolutely implementing the decisions and plans of the Central Committee so that all the orders from the top are carried out. Governing a country is like planting a tree. If the roots are firm, the branches and leaves flourish. Footnote 1. Wu Jing. Governance of the Zhengguan period. Zhengguan Zhengyao. End of footnote 1. The roots of our governance are the leadership of the party and the Chinese socialist system. We must pronounce it confidently and unequivocally. Party leadership must be comprehensive, systematic, and holistic, and it must be followed in all respects: economic, political, cultural, social, and eco-environmental progress, national defense and armed forces, national reunification, foreign affairs, and strengthening the party. If it were absent or weakened in any field, respect, or stage, the party's strength and the causes of our party and country would be undermined. Our emphasis on upholding the authority and the centralized, unified leadership of the Central Committee does not mean that democratic centralism and intra-party democracy can be ignored. It is wrong to regard the two as mutually contradictory. Promoting intra-party democracy and exercising centralized, unified leadership are consistent rather than contradictory. Democratic centralism is the party's fundamental organizational principle and intra-party democracy its lifeline. Our democratic centralism is a system in which we have both centralism and democracy, both discipline and freedom, both unity of will and personal ease of mind. It is a system that integrates democracy and centralism. Since the 18th CPC National Congress, the Central Committee has attached great importance to developing intra-party democracy and drawing on collective wisdom. before issuing important materials, reports to the party's congresses, documents of the plenary sessions of the Central Committee, important documents and major decisions of the party, reports on the work of the government, key measures for reform and development, and important documents on the work of central departments, we always solicit opinions from a certain number of party members. In some cases, we solicit several rounds of opinions. Sometimes, the range of solicitation covers all the provinces and equivalent administrative units, or dozens of departments of the Central Committee and the central government. When reviewing major decisions, the Central Committee requires that the opinions collected are reported, whether they are favorable or not. The Central Committee strictly follows these institutionalized and standardized procedures. Of course, after collecting opinions and advice from all parties involved, it is the Central Committee that makes the final decision. During the process of deliberation and discussion, we give broad rein to democracy and let everyone speak up their mind freely. Once a decision is made by the Central Committee, however, it must be implemented without fail. During the course of implementation, complaints and problems may be reported in accordance with the relevant intra-party procedures to higher-level authorities and even to the Central Committee. With such a huge party in a vast country like ours, if the final and sole authority of the Central Committee were undermined, the decisions of the Central Committee were ignored, and everyone followed their own way of thinking and worked their own way, nothing would be achieved. We adopt centralism on the basis of giving broad rein to democracy and upholding the authority and centralized, unified leadership of the Central Committee so that we can pool the wisdom of the entire party and reflect the will of all party members. This is one of our party's great innovations. It is a major strength of the leadership by the party and socialist system. It is conducive to rational, democratic, and law-based decision-making and avoiding major or even worse, fatal mistakes. It can also help us overcome segmentation and a silo mentality and avoid a situation where there is only deliberation but no decision, or where decisions are made but not implemented. It can help form a powerful synergy propelling the development of the party and the country. The relationship between the party and the government is not only a major theoretical issue, it is also an important practical one. After the beginning of reform and opening up in 1978, we discussed the separation of the party and the government with the goal of solving the problems of low efficiency, excessive and overstaffed departments, and a dilatory approach to work. Admittedly, at that time, we lacked both theoretical understanding and practical experience, and our efforts to solve our problems of governance and governing capability were tentative. Since the beginning of reform and opening up, whatever adjustments have been made to the relationship between the party and the government, there has been one unchanging principle, which was stated by Deng Xiaoping. Quote, "We must uphold leadership by the party and never abandon it, but the party should exercise its leadership effectively." End quote. Footnote 2. Deng Xiaoping. On Reform of the Political Structure, Selected Works of Deng Xiaoping, Volume 3, English Edition, Foreign Languages Press, Beijing, 1994, page 181, end of footnote 2. On this subject of leadership, Deng quoted Vladimir Lenin. Quote, "The dictatorship of the proletariat means a persistent struggle, bloody and bloodless, violent and peaceful, military and economic, educational and administrative, against the forces and traditions of the old society. Without a party of iron that has been tempered in the struggle, a party enjoying the confidence of all honest people in the class in question, a party capable of watching and influencing the mood of the masses, such a struggle cannot be waged successfully." End quote. Footnote 3. V.I. Lenin, Left-wing communism, an infantile disorder. V.I. Lenin, Collected Works, Volume 31, English edition. Progress Publishers, Moscow, 1966, pages 44 through 45, end of footnote 3. Deng emphasized that this truth expressed by Lenin still holds. When it comes to properly handling the relationship between the party and the government, the first and foremost principle is to uphold the leadership of the party. This is a precondition for the division of functions. Furthermore, no matter how functions are divided, the prime purpose is to uphold and improve the leadership of the party. As the CPC is the ruling party in our country, its leadership position and ruling status are closely linked. The party's power to exercise centralized, unified leadership cannot be divided. We cannot talk about the separation of the party and the government or the integration of the two in a simplistic way. Rather, we should constantly improve the way the party exercises leadership and governance according to specific features and basic conditions in different fields. In this round of reform of party and state institutions, we have reflected deeply on strengthening the overall leadership of the party, taking a holistic approach to the setup of party and government institutions, and improving the efficiency of the party and the government in the new era. The focus of our efforts is to design and organize institutions to ensure stronger leadership by the party over all areas. We will adjust those party and government institutions whose jurisdiction is too narrow and whose functions overlap, and place the offices of some CPC Central Committee's bodies for decision-making, deliberation, and coordination in government departments in an effort to remove the demarcation between the party and the government and have one matter dealt with in a joint manner. Our purpose is to strengthen the leadership of the party, improve the government's capacity to deliver, smooth out the relationship between the party and the government, and establish and improve the decision-making and coordination mechanisms of the Central Committee for important work. This is a major decision made by the Central Committee based on positive and negative past experiences. For local party committees at various levels, strengthening leadership over important work means improving their capacity for organization and coordination so as to ensure the effective implementation of major decisions and plans of the Central Committee. They can set up specific institutions in light of local conditions, other than those party and government institutions and functions that fall under the centralized, unified leadership of the Central Committee, and those concerning consistency of the local regime, of the legal regime, administrative orders and policies, and market management. Other institutions and functions at local levels do not have to correspond to national ones. In addition, local authorities should identify priorities and address themselves to tasks with a decisive bearing on reform and development in their localities, and refrain from trying to attend to major and minor issues at one and the same time. Second, we must understand the goal of further reform of party and state institutions. It was determined at this plenary session that the objective of further reform of party and state institutions is to establish a functional system of these institutions that is complete, well-conceived, standard, and efficient. A party leadership system that ensures the party's core role in exercising overall leadership and coordinating the efforts of all. A law-based administrative governance system with clear functions and responsibilities, world-class armed forces with Chinese characteristics, and a sound system of people's organizations for bridging and serving the general populace. With these systems in place, we will be able to promote coordinated actions and form synergy among the People's Congresses, governments, political advisory bodies, and supervisory, judicial, and prosecuting organs, people's organizations, enterprises, public institutions, and social groups under the unified leadership of the CPC so as to comprehensively raise the national governance capacity. As an important part of socialist system with Chinese characteristics, the functional system of party and state institutions encompasses the administrative activities of the party and state at various stages and levels and in various fields, the interactive relationship between them and the intrinsic connections within them. By reforming and improving the systems of party leadership, government administration, the armed forces, and people's organizations, we need to promote the integration of various institutions and functions, improve coordination and efficiency in the handling of party and state affairs, and establish a basic framework of party and state institutional setup and functional allocation that adapts to the requirements of the new tasks in the new era. The party leadership system that ensures the party exercises overall leadership and coordinates the efforts of all is of primary importance, covering all areas and elements. Under the leadership of the party, people's congresses, governments, political advisory bodies, and supervisory, judicial, and prosecuting organs, people's organizations, enterprises, public institutions, social groups, and armed forces fulfill their respective duties and responsibilities and coordinate with one another in an orderly manner. This ensures that the central and local authorities have consistent policies that are implemented smoothly, effectively, and with vitality. Looking to realize the two centenary goals and implementing both the five-sphere integrated plan and the four-pronged comprehensive strategy in a coordinated way, we have defined far-sighted institutional strategies in this round of further reform of party and state institutions, with the goal of establishing the basic framework of the setup and functions of party and state institutions and achieving optimization, coordination, and efficiency. Optimization means that the setup and functions must be well conceived and rational, and power must be matched with responsibilities. Coordination means the need to balance central leadership and the delegation of power and the need to address priority areas. Efficiency means good performance and smooth procedures. To meet these requirements, we should properly handle the following bilateral relationships: the relationship between centralized leadership and delegation of power. In further reform of party and state institutions, the two are inherently coherent. With proper centralization, we can ensure that departments function methodically and avoid acting in disunity, thus improving the overall efficiency of the system. Through proper delegation of power, we can stimulate the enthusiasm, initiative, and creativity of every unit and every subsystem. In this round of further reform, we will establish and improve the systems and mechanisms by which the party exercises leadership over major tasks and optimize the central committee's bodies for decision-making, deliberation, and coordination, which are responsible for top-level design, overall planning, coordination, and promotion of major work. We will also strengthen and optimize the party's leadership over tasks regarding further reform, law-based governance, the economy, agriculture, and rural areas, discipline, inspection, and supervision, organization, communication and culture, national security, the judiciary and law enforcement, the United Front, ethnic and religious affairs, education, science and technology, cybersecurity and information technology, foreign affairs, and auditing. These arrangements are intended to enable the party to exercise more effective leadership and coordination over major initiatives that have an overall bearing on the undertakings of the party and the state, exert stronger centralized leadership at a higher level, better wield its power and fulfill its responsibilities so as to improve efficiency and ensure that all of its decisions are implemented. It is important to note that the party exercises overall leadership over major issues rather than attending to all matters big and small. The relationship between the part and the whole, and between the present and the future. The further reform of party and state institutions has an overall bearing on the undertakings of the party and the state and involves all areas and aspects of economic and social development. In this round of further reform, some departments need to be strengthened, some will be merged, some are to be dissolved, some will be placed under new or other superior bodies, and so forth. If one takes a local perspective and sees from the existing organizational makeup and authorization, they may well come up with a lot of reasons for maintaining the status quo. However, faced with new circumstances and tasks, and the need for long-term development, if we follow the old mentality and believe that it is fine to remain the same and there is no need to reform, we will be unable to solve the outstanding problems and may even create problems. In this round of further reform, we plan to establish the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Ecology and Environment, Ministry of Veterans Affairs, Ministry of Emergency Management, National Healthcare Security Administration, China International Development Cooperation Agency, National Immigration Administration, and other institutions. To set up these agencies, we have taken into consideration both the need to solve the most prominent problems of the present stage and the need to adapt to developing trends in the future. As plans made for the overall progress of the undertakings of the party and the state, they are meant to address both pressing current problems and also preset measures for some strategic goals, so as to meet the long-term needs of the party and the state. The relationship between large and small departments. An important goal of this round of further reform is to solve the problem of overlapping and fragmented departmental functions, and to set up institutions in a coordinated and integrated manner so as to better tap into their efficiency and strengths. To achieve this goal, we have taken substantial steps towards establishing larger government departments, and this should be carried out steadily. Not all departments need to be large, since some are specialized, and some are comprehensive. Even for comprehensive ones, large size does not fit all, nor is it essential to put all related functions in a single department. The key is to group functions in a rational manner in line with reality that facilitates work and improves efficiency. Large or small, it all depends on needs. The relationship between optimization and coordination. This round of further reform involves party, government, military, and people's organizations and is related to economic, political, cultural, social, and eco-environmental systems and the development of the party. The transfer of functions and adjustments of institutional setup are closely linked, and the internal correlation and interaction between various reforms is strong. Each reform will have an impact on other reforms and need their support. This requires us to place greater importance on advancing different reforms in a coordinated and mutually reinforcing manner while optimizing institutional setup and functional assignment so that institutional efficiency is improved across the board. Third, we must understand the direction and requirement of the reform of the socialist market economy and see to it that the market plays the decisive role in resource allocation and that the government plays its role more effectively. All rounds of institutional reform since the beginning of reform and opening up in 1978 have focused on reform of our economic system, featuring the separation of government functions from the management of enterprises, state assets, public institutions, and social groups. They have promoted reform and opening up and socialist modernization. Currently, there are still many institutional obstacles holding up our high-quality development, and the potential of economic reform needs to be further tapped. We need to accelerate reform under the precondition of keeping overall economic and social stability and work hard to develop an economy with more effective market mechanisms, dynamic micro-entities, and sound macro regulation so as to provide institutional support for high-quality development. In this round of further reform, we have made substantial adjustments to institutions and their functions in the fields of macro management and market regulation. This is meant to give full play to the strengths of the market and the government so that they complement and coordinate with each other for better quality, more efficient, fairer, and more sustainable development. The reform emphasizes the need to reduce micromanagement and the number of items subject to government approval, and to minimize the government's direct allocation of market resources and direct intervention in economic activities. The aim is to realize effective incentives generated from property rights and ensure free flows of factors, flexible prices, fair and orderly competition, and business survival based on competition, so that market players have more room to develop the economy and create wealth with vigor and vitality, and to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of resource allocation. Ensuring that the market plays the decisive role in resource allocation does not mean the government has no role to play. It should do what is needed and never go beyond its purview. Since our country applies a system of socialist market economy, we should do full justice to the strengths of its socialist system by allowing the party and the government to play an active role in matters beyond the market's capability. To achieve innovation and improvement in macro control, we have taken big steps to reduce micromanagement and the number of items subject to approval. Responsible departments should shift their main focus to macro management of the economy. They should improve the system for macro control, employ national development plans for strategic guidance, improve coordination between economic policies in the fields of finance, monetary management, industry, and regional development, and make macro control more forward-looking, targeted, and coordinated. To strengthen market regulation, we have created a top-level design geared to dealing with pressing current problems and the need for future development. Therefore, we have decided to set up the State Administration for Market Regulation, which will integrate the main functions of the departments for industry and commerce, quality supervision, and food and drug administration. We have devised clear requirements for comprehensive law enforcement in market regulation and maintained unified anti-monopoly law enforcement and IPR protection in a centralized manner. These measures will reduce government-imposed transaction costs for businesses and give more powerful impetus to economic and social development. Fourth, we must understand the people-centered philosophy of development and address the most pressing and immediate problems that concern the people the most. To ensure that the people enjoy a happy life is the ultimate goal of all our work and is an important manifestation of our party's fundamental purpose of serving the people wholeheartedly. For this reason, we must follow the people-centered philosophy of development in furthering institutional reform and fulfill the people's expectation for a better life. This round of further reform focuses on improving people's well-being in key areas, aiming to make the social security system and access to public services fairer and more sustainable. We will redouble our efforts to reorganize and optimize the setup of the institutions and establish a number of new agencies in areas of public concern, such as education, culture, public health, medical insurance, veteran affairs, immigration service, eco-environmental protection, and emergency management. These measures are meant to reinforce government functions in public services and social management, ensure and improve public well-being, and safeguard public security in a better way. Relevant departments should have a strong sense of purpose, mission, and responsibility. They should see improving people's lives as their greatest achievement, treat people's concerns and worries as their own, and serve to meet people's urgent needs. They should quicken their pace to straighten out their functions and activities so as to form synergy as soon as possible and do a good and solid job for the benefit of the people. Law enforcement is an important way for administrative organs to fulfill their governmental functions, to resolve serious problems of failure to enforce the law in a procedure-based, strict, transparent, and non-abusive manner, as well as nonfeasance and malfeasance in law enforcement. We must step up our pace in establishing a law-based administrative system that matches power with responsibility and is authoritative and efficient. Reform in law enforcement is a special task in this round of further reform. Law enforcement teams are to be established in market regulation, eco-environmental protection, the cultural industry, transport, and agriculture on the basis of integrating relevant functions. We will make a substantial reduction in the categories of law enforcement teams and allocate law enforcement forces on a rational basis, address the problem of laws being enforced by multiple departments at different levels, and work to ensure strict, procedure-based, impartial, and non-abusive law enforcement. All provincial authorities and central departments should improve the system for listing their powers and obligations, speed up the codification of institutional setup functions, purviews, procedures, and responsibilities, strengthen checks on and oversight over administrative power, and see to it that power is designated, disciplined, restricted, and supervised in accordance with the law. Fifth, we must understand the importance of keeping both central and local authorities motivated. The relationship between central and local authorities is always critical in our political life. In April 1956, Mao Zedong pointed out in the report titled On the 10 Major Relationships, quote, "Our attention should now be focused on how to enlarge the powers of the local authorities to some extent, give them greater independence, and let them do more, all on the basis that the unified leadership of the central authorities is to be strengthened. This will be advantageous to our task of building a powerful socialist country. Our territory is so vast, our population is so large, and the conditions are so complex that it is far better to have the initiative come from both the central and the local authorities than from one source alone." End quote. Giving full play to the initiative of both central and local authorities has always been a fundamental principle. We must uphold the authority and centralized, unified leadership of the Central Committee when carrying out institutional reform at local levels. This is essential for ensuring the smooth implementation of policies and orders from the central authorities across the country. As a unitary state, local party committees and governments must first of all ensure effective implementation of the decisions and plans of the Central Committee. The nature of our state and the duties of local authorities determine that the setup of key institutions at the provincial, city, and county levels must basically correspond with that of the central authorities and should not be multifarious. Other than this, local authorities should be allowed to set up institutions in certain fields in accordance with local conditions, so as to adapt to the needs of social management and public services and bring into full play the initiative of the localities. In recent years, some central departments have interfered with the setup of local institutions, some exerting control through projects and finance, others through assessments and inspections, and still others through speaking directly to provincial party secretaries and governors. Although the intention of these departments is to maintain the coherence of the vertical institutional setup and to make their own systems operate well, they should not ignore the overall situation and harm the initiative of local authorities. Here I declare that other than as authorized by the Central Committee, no department shall intervene in any way in the setup of local institutions. Quotas on the number of institutions represent the main binding limit on institutional setup at the provincial, city, and county levels, and an issue of common concern to localities. Reform must follow strict and standard management and give sufficient consideration to local realities. The number of party institutions and government agencies should be counted together and must not exceed the total quota, and party and government institutions at subdepartment, subdivision, and subsection levels under provincial, city, and county governments, as well as public institutions with administrative functions, are to be included in quota management. The current quotas should be adjusted accordingly. All local authorities must meet their quota by dissolving departments established without proper procedures, ending the malpractice of cloning organizations. Footnote 4. Some party or government institutions have a principal title and one or more subsidiary names, which might be used for non-core activities. Cloning occurs when a subsidiary name is converted into a real organization and provided with staff and other resources for the purpose of expanding areas of jurisdiction and power. End of footnote 4. And doing away with public institutions set up without authorization. In this round of reform, based on the experience of pilot reform projects in some localities, we have set a new requirement of establishing community-level administrative systems that are simple and highly efficient. Our main idea is to integrate community-level institutions for approvals, services, and law enforcement, use institutional staffing resources in a coordinated manner, and establish comprehensive institutions by integrating relevant functions. We should try our best to let community-level institutions have access to resources, provide services, and be vested with management responsibilities. We must ensure that community affairs are run by communities themselves, that community-level powers are delegated to communities, and that there are people responsible for community affairs. We should make life convenient for the public by ensuring that they can get problems solved at one single department and with one-stop service. It is made clear in this round of reform that higher-level institutions need to improve their leadership over community-level institutions. Both the one-to-many model, in which one community-level institution undertakes assignments from multiple superior institutions, and the many-to-one model, in which different community-level institutions request instructions from and report to the same higher-level institution, can coexist. Deeper reform requires greater resolve. Excerpts from speeches made between July 6, 2018 and November 26, 2019. 1. Since the 19th CPC National Congress in 2017, on the basis of the achievements of reform after the 18th National Congress in 2012, the CPC Central Committee has lost no time in advancing reform measures of overall importance, making major progress in furthering reform in all respects. To move ahead, we should focus our strength on major difficulties and tough battles, stimulate the vitality of our systems, take advantage of all experience gained at the grassroots, and encourage officials to work hard and be achievers, thereby effectively furthering reform in all respects. From the speech at the third meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, July 6, 2018. 2. Implementation is the key to successful reform, and it is also a difficult task. As we enjoy ever more favorable conditions for pursuing and implementing reform, and the theoretical, practical, and institutional foundations of reform grow stronger along with public support, we should concentrate more energy and make greater efforts to ensure effective implementation, improve leadership and coordination, and focus our reform on practical problems. From the speech at the fourth meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, September 20th, 2018. 3. Starting a new historical period of reform and opening up and socialist modernization, the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee in 1978 was a landmark event. The third plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee in 2013 was also a milestone because it started a new era for further reform on all fronts and for planning and advancing reform in a systematic and holistic way. It broke new ground in our drive for reform and opening up. Aiming for decisive achievements in important areas and key aspects of reform by 2020, we should continue to fight tough battles, crack hard nuts, and ensure we succeed in every single reform that we initiate so as to lay a firm foundation for completing the reform tasks set at the 2013 session. From the speech at the sixth meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, January 23rd, 2019. 4. At present, the reform and development in our country is undergoing profound changes. As uncertain and unstable external factors increase, our reform and development are faced with new circumstances and issues. In this context, we must maintain strategic resolve, focus on solving problems, guide reform in light of the circumstances, make coordinated plans, implement targeted policies, and adopt effective and powerful measures to forestall and resolve major problems, so as to ensure that reform can better serve the overall development of our economy and society. From the speech at the 8th meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, May 29th, 2019. 5. Further reform in all respects is an important manifestation of our party's commitment to its original aspiration and founding mission. The deeper the reform, the more resolute we should be in shouldering responsibilities, taking actions, making rapid and steady progress, and forging ahead with courage. We must never pause or slacken our efforts. Through our aspiration and mission education campaign, we need to take a more proactive approach to reform in thinking, action, and political principles. We must brave problems and difficulties, concentrate on addressing inadequacies, shore up points of weakness, stimulate vitality, and ensure implementation. We must have the determination to break impediments of vested interests and remove all institutional barriers to development. From the speech at the 9th meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, July 24th, 2019. 6. In implementing the reform tasks set by the CPC Central Committee since the third plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee, the key in the early stage is to build a solid foundation and a strong framework, and the focus in the middle phase is to advance reform in all respects and build up momentum. Our task now is to boost integration, collaboration, and efficiency, consolidate and entrench the achievements we have made in recent years in removing institutional barriers and fostering innovation in policy, and develop a more mature and well-defined system in every field. from the speech at the 10th meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, September 9th, 2019. 7. The fourth plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee in 2019 and the third plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee in 2013 follow the same themes, support each other theoretically, and reinforce each other in actual practice. They share the same goals and have drawn up important plans that are consistent and progressive. The former systematically integrates the theoretical, institutional, and practical gains on furthering comprehensive reform since the third plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee and maps out a clearer top-level design for the new era. We must focus on upholding and improving socialism with Chinese characteristics and modernizing our state governance system and capacity. With that in mind, we should be more proactive in improving state systems and governance through reform and extend reform in all respects with a focus on improving the systems. We should examine the progress of all reform tasks against our goals and log on our agenda the key measures decided at the fourth plenary session in a timely manner. We must analyze and define measures to address badly needed systems for state governance as defined by the CPC Central Committee and systems that are essential for meeting the people's expectation for a better life, and ensure that reform measures are well coordinated, fully integrated, and truly effective. From the speech at the 11th meeting of the Central Commission for Further Reform, November 26, 2019. Valuable experience from 40 years of reform and opening up. Part of the speech at the conference celebrating the 40th anniversary of the reform and opening up. December 18th, 2018. To keep up with the times, our best recourse is to comply with the trends of history and to seek and proactively respond to change. As an ancient Chinese scholar said, practice improves understanding, and a deeper understanding guides further practice. Footnote 1. Zhang Shi, Understanding the Analects of Confucius, Lun Yu Jie. Zhang Shi, 1133 to 1180, was a Neo-Confucian philosopher and educator of the Southern Song dynasty. End of footnote 1. The valuable experience we have gained from 40 years of reform and opening up is the intellectual wealth of the CPC and the Chinese people. The experience provides significant guidance for upholding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. That is why we must value it, uphold it, and continue to enrich and develop it through further practice. First, we must ensure party leadership over each and every aspect of our work and continue to strengthen and develop that leadership. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that party leadership is the defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics and the greatest strength of China's socialist system. The party exercises overall leadership across all areas of endeavor in every part of the country. Relying on this, we have been able to achieve historic transformation, usher in a new era of reform and opening up, and embark on a new journey towards the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. We have been able to address major risks and challenges and overcome repeated hardships and setbacks. We have been able to cope with changes, quell political turbulence, battle against such threats as floods, SARS, and earthquakes, and deal with various crises. Finally, we have been able to adhere to the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics rather than following the old path of a rigid, closed-door policy or an erroneous path by abandoning socialism. To uphold party leadership, we must keep improving it and adapting to the demands of practice, the current era, and the people. Upholding party leadership is an essential principle that defines the future of the party and the Chinese nation, and all party members and the Chinese people must keep alignment with the Central Committee in their way of thinking, in political principles, and in actions without wavering. On the path ahead, we must enhance our sense of the four consciousnesses, the four-sphere confidence, and the two upholds. Party leadership should be exercised and manifested in all areas, including reform, development, stability, domestic affairs, foreign policy, and national defense, and in governance of the party, the country, and the armed forces. Every step in reform and opening up is difficult, and we will certainly face risks and challenges of all kinds, even raging waves and storms. Our party must exercise overall leadership and coordinate work in all areas. Its governance must be scientific, democratic, and law-based. We must improve the way the party exercises leadership and governance, improve the party's ability to lead and govern, and strengthen the party's ability to resolve, to chart our course, craft overall plans, design policy, and promote reform. All these efforts must be directed to ensuring that reform and opening up is on the right course. Second, we must pursue people-centered development and fulfill their desire for a better life. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that it is Chinese communists' original aspiration and founding mission to seek happiness for the Chinese people and rejuvenate the Chinese nation. It is also why we started reform and opening up. Our party comes from the people, has its roots among the people, and works for the benefit of the people. Serving the people wholeheartedly is the fundamental purpose of the party. Therefore, meeting the fundamental interests of all our people is the starting point and ultimate goal of all our work. Our policy making should be based on what the people support, approve of, and are content with. We should comply with the people's aspirations, respect the people's opinions, be attentive to public sentiment, and be dedicated to improving people's well-being. We need to formulate and implement the right theories, guidelines, principles, and policies to lead the people forward, and at the same time draw impetus from people's creativity and demands for development. We must ensure the people share the benefits of reform and opening up, and be motivated to engage in further reform and opening up and socialist modernization. On the path ahead, we must always have as our goal the people's desire for a better life. We must fulfill the party's fundamental purpose of serving the people wholeheartedly, put into practice the mass line, and ensure the people's principal status. We must respect the expectations the people have expressed, the experience they have created, the rights and interests they enjoy, and the role they have played, so as to fully release their immense creativity. We need to improve our democratic systems, expand democratic channels, diversify forms of democracy, and enhance legal guarantees for democracy, so as to ensure the people enjoy democratic rights that are extensive and full, real and concrete, and effective and applicable in accordance with the law. We should address people's needs, concerns, and expectations, ensure that they share the achievements of economic, political, cultural, social, and eco-environmental development, give them a stronger sense of having direct and substantial benefits, happiness, and security, and continue to promote the well-rounded human development and common prosperity for everyone. Third, we must maintain the guiding role of Marxism and encourage theoretical development based on practice. 40 years of experience has taught us that innovation is the lifeline of reform and opening up. Development has no final destination. Free minds know no bounds. Friedrich Engels said, quote, "The final causes of all social changes and political revolutions are to be sought not in men's brains, not in men's better insights into eternal truth and justice, but in changes in the modes of production and exchange." End quote. Footnote 2. Friedrich Engels, Anti-Düring, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels Collected Works, Volume 25, English edition, Progress Publishers, Moscow, 1979, page 254, end of footnote 2. We need to combine theory and practice, answer the questions posed by the times and the people, and dispel the mist clouding our practices and judgment in an effort to adapt Marxism to China's conditions, keep it up to date, enhance its popular appeal, and break new ground. On the path ahead, we must free our minds while seeking truth from facts, and be guided by Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory. The theory of three represents the scientific outlook on development and the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. Developing Marxism in the 21st century and China today is a mandatory responsibility of contemporary Chinese communists. To achieve this, we need to be more conscious about resolving problems, keeping up with the times, and developing a strategic mindset. We need a keen historical insight and a broad global vision to identify the nature of things and the intrinsic connections between them. We need to follow closely the creative activities of all peoples, learn from the outstanding achievements of all civilizations, and respond to the new and significant challenges constantly posed by our times and our practice. In this way, we will increase the appeal of Marxism in the contemporary Chinese context. Fourth, we must adhere to the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics and continue to develop Chinese socialism. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that the direction in which we advance decides our future. The path we have chosen decides our destiny. To ensure our future rests in our own hands, we must be firmly committed to our ideal and path. Over the past 40 years of reform and opening up, our party has focused its theory and practice on upholding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics. China is a vast country with over 5,000 years of history and a huge population. There is no manual to which we can refer in promoting reform and development, neither do we have any need for condescending instructors to lecture our people. Lu Xun said, quote, "What is a road? It comes of trampling places where no road was before, of opening up wasteland where only brambles grew." End quote. Footnote 3. Lu Xun, 1881 to 1936, was a man of letters, thinker, and revolutionary, and one of the founders of modern Chinese literature. End of footnote 3. Footnote 4. Lu Xun, Random Thoughts 66, The Road of Life. Lu Xun Selected Works, Volume 2, English edition, Foreign Languages Press, Beijing, 1980, page 54. End of footnote 4. The path of socialism with Chinese characteristics will allow China to catch up with the times in great strides and play a leading role. On the path ahead, we must act under the guidance of the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era and the guiding principles of the party's 19th National Congress held in 2017. We must have full confidence in our path, theory, system, and culture, and keep reform and opening up in the right direction. What to reform and how to reform must be assessed against the overall goal of improving and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics and modernizing our system and capacity for governance. We must reform what should be reformed and can be reformed. We must not reform what should not be reformed and cannot be reformed. We must remain committed to the party's basic line, fulfilling the central task of economic development while upholding the four cardinal principles and furthering reform and opening up, in the great practice of socialism with Chinese characteristics. This is a long-term principle which we shall never abandon. Fifth, we must improve and develop the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics and continuously build on our institutional strengths. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that systems are of fundamental significance to the overall stable and long-term development of the party and the country. Improving and developing the Chinese socialist system is key to China's progress. It provides a strong guarantee for unlocking and developing productivity, for releasing and enhancing social vitality, for maintaining the vigor of the party and the country, for overall social stability, for the people to live and work in contentment, and for national security. It facilitates the establishment of dynamic systems and mechanisms that allow all elements, such as labor, knowledge, technology, management, and capital, to fully function and to bring forth all surging sources of social wealth. On the path ahead, we must, without hesitation, consolidate and develop the public sector, and at the same time, encourage, support, and guide the development of the non-public sector. We must give full play to the decisive role of the market in resource allocation, give better play to the role of government, and invigorate all market entities. We must ensure that the party's leadership, the people's position as masters of the country, and law-based governance form an indivisible whole. We must uphold and improve the system of people's congresses, the system of CPC-led multi-party cooperation and political consultation, the system of regional ethnic autonomy, and the system of grassroots self-governance. We must advance law-based governance, consolidate and develop the broadest possible patriotic, united front, develop socialist consultative democracy, and provide institutional guarantees to ensure that the people are the masters of the country. We need to strengthen cultural systems. We must uphold socialism, rally public support, foster a new generation with sound values and ethics, develop Chinese culture, and build a positive image of China. We need to foster and observe the core socialist values, promote the creative evolution of fine traditional culture, keep alive our revolutionary culture, and develop advanced culture, so that the Chinese culture will be shaped into one that shines in the current era and the world. We need to reinforce our systems of social governance. We should continue to promote social equity and justice and maintain social order and security. We need to reinforce eco-environmental protection and put in place the strictest possible systems. We must eliminate all institutional obstacles and vested interests impeding our country's development, speed up the establishment of systems and mechanisms that are comprehensive, procedure-based, and effective, and make the socialist system more mature and better defined. Sixth, we must pursue development as a top priority and increase our overall national strength. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that the essential requirement and fundamental task of socialism is to unleash and develop productive forces and increase the overall strength of our socialist country. Economic development is the absolute principle, and what we pursue is sound and high-quality development. We must focus on the central goal of economic development and promote sustained and sound social and economic development. This is our best recourse if we are to increase China's economic power, technological base, defense capabilities, and overall strength, and to lay a solid material foundation for upholding and developing Chinese socialism and rejuvenating the Chinese nation. On the path ahead, We must resolve the principal challenge facing our society, the gap between unbalanced and inadequate development and the growing expectation of the people for a better life. We must pursue with resolve the concept of innovative, coordinated, green, open, and shared development. We must implement the five-sphere integrated plan and the four-pronged comprehensive strategy to promote high-quality development. We must see to it that new industrialization, IT, application, urbanization, and agricultural modernization go forward hand in hand. We must quicken our pace in developing a modernized economy and strive to achieve better quality, more efficient, fairer, and more sustainable development. We should pursue supply-side structural reform as our main task, transform the growth model, improve the economic structure, and foster new drivers of growth. We should expand domestic demand and implement the coordinated regional development strategy and rural revitalization strategy. We must take tough steps to forestall and diffuse major risks, carry out targeted poverty eradication, and prevent and control pollution. We should pursue the philosophy that innovation is the primary impetus and talent is the resource of first importance. We should implement the innovation-driven development strategy, improve the national innovation system, and speed up innovation in key and core technologies to create new engines for social and economic development. We should strengthen our commitment to eco-civilization. Lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. Acting on this understanding, we should develop eco-friendly growth models and ways of life so that our country will be more beautiful and our people will enjoy a more pleasant environment. Seventh, we must open the country wider to the outside world and join other countries in building a global community of shared future. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that openness brings progress while isolation leads to backwardness. China cannot develop in isolation from the rest of the world, and the world needs China for global prosperity. We need to give overall consideration to domestic development and the international situation, adhere to the fundamental national policy of opening up, and adopt a proactive opening up policy. In this way, we will establish a multidimensional, multi-tiered, and wide-ranging framework for opening up, which creates a favorable international environment for China to enjoy a broad space for development. On the path ahead, we must champion the cause of peace, development, cooperation, and mutual benefit, uphold the fundamental foreign policy goals of preserving world peace and promoting common development, and forge a new approach to international relations featuring mutual respect, equity and justice, and win-win cooperation. We respect the right of the peoples of all countries to choose their own development path. We endeavor to uphold international equity and justice, stand for democracy in international relations, and oppose acts that impose one's will on others or interfere in the internal affairs of others. The strong must not be allowed to bully the weak. China will continue to play its part as a major and responsible country. It will support the development of the vast number of developing countries, take an active part in reforming and developing the global governance system, and join the global endeavor to build an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world that enjoys lasting peace, universal security, and common prosperity. We support multilateral trade regimes that are open, transparent, inclusive, and non-discriminatory. Regimes that liberalize and facilitate trade and investment and make economic globalization more open, inclusive, and balanced so that its benefits are shared by all. We will focus on promoting the Belt and Road Initiative and work with other countries to build a new platform for international cooperation and create new drivers for common development. China will never pursue development at the expense of others' interests, nor will China ever give up its own legitimate rights and interests. China pursues a national defense policy that is in nature defensive. China does not pose a threat to any other country. No matter what stage of development it reaches, China will never seek hegemony. Eighth, we must exercise full and rigorous governance over the party and improve its ability to innovate, power to unite, and energy to fight. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that it takes a good blacksmith to forge good tools. China's success hinges on our party, so we must ensure that the party exercises effective self-supervision and practices strict self-governance in every respect. In leading social reform, such as reform and opening up and socialist modernization, the party must have the courage to reform itself and rid itself of any virus that erodes its health. In order to forever maintain its close ties with the people, the party must keep cleansing, improving, and reforming itself and strengthen its ability to lead politically, to guide through theory, to organize the people, and to rally public support. On the path ahead, we must act in accordance with the general requirements for strengthening the party for the new era, and with reinforcing the party's political foundations as the overarching principle, continue to enhance the party's solidarity, creativity, and capacity for governance to make it stronger and more capable. We need to scrutinize ourselves according to the requirements of the times, remind ourselves to guard against potential dangers, elevate ourselves in the spirit of reform and innovation, improve ourselves by addressing risks and challenges, cleanse ourselves by resolving striking problems within the party, and keep improving our ability in governing the party. We should select officials on the basis of both integrity and ability, with priority given to integrity, and on the basis of merit. We need to train a large number of high-caliber officials and professionals who are loyal to the party, have moral integrity, and demonstrate a keen sense of responsibility. We must have the resolve and tenacity to persevere in the never-ending fight against corruption, intensifying our efforts to address both the symptoms and root causes in order to clean out all corrupt officials. We must ensure that officials are honest, government is clean, and political affairs are handled with integrity, striving to build a corruption-free political environment for further reform and opening up. Ninth, we must uphold dialectical and historical materialism to balance reform, development, and stability. 40 years of reform and opening up have taught us that China as a large country cannot afford any fatal mistake on issues of fundamental importance. To ensure sustained and steady progress of reform and opening up, we need to uphold party leadership while respecting the people's creativity. We need to explore experiences like crossing a river by feeling for stones, while enhancing top-level design. We need to adopt a problem-solving approach while sticking to our goal. We need to launch pilot programs while advancing reform on all fronts. We need to encourage bold experiment while being realistic and pragmatic. On the path ahead, we should adopt a strategic perspective, develop creative thinking, and a dialectical approach. We should think in terms of the rule of law and prepare for the worst-case scenarios. We need to enhance macro thinking and top-level design, remain problem-oriented, and focus on prominent problems facing our country. We need to carry out in-depth research and encourage experiments in grassroots reform. We need to make decision-making on reform consistent with decision-making on legislation, and make the former more rational. In the spirit of leaving a mark in the iron tools we clutch and footprints in the stones we tread, we should resolve problems with force and tenacity as a hammer drives a nail, and ensure that all major reform measures are implemented to the letter. We should have the courage to break new ground and try out new experiments, and at the same time, make active yet prudent efforts to advance reform swiftly and steadily. In doing so, We will strike a balance between promoting reform, pursuing development, and maintaining stability. We must advance reform and opening up in the right direction, on the right course, and with consistent force, so as to steadily promote reform and opening up in the new era. End of audiobook, part 7.